As we age, many of us find ourselves reflecting on the years gone by, feeling a quiet emptiness that seems to grow within us. We have spent decades pouring our love, energy, and sacrifices into those we care about. Our families, our careers, our relationships. We've given endlessly, believing that one day the love we've shared would be returned, that the time and effort we invested would come back to us in kind. But as the years pass, we begin to notice something unsettling. The calls from loved ones grow fewer, the visits more infrequent, and the relationships we once cherished start to feel distant. It can feel as though the world has moved on, leaving us behind. In these moments, a question may arise within us. After all that I've given, what is left for me? This question is not just about the lack of reciprocation we may feel, but a deeper, more profound realization, the need to shift our focus inward. The later years of life bring with them a unique opportunity, the chance to finally embrace the importance of self-care and inner peace. Too often, we associate aging with loss, but in truth, it is a time for renewal. It is the perfect moment to accept that the journey of life is not about waiting for others to give back, but about rediscovering the joy and fulfillment that comes from within. The practice of self-care in old age is not selfishness. It is a profound act of wisdom, an acknowledgement that we must first love ourselves before we can continue to give freely to others. As we navigate the later years of our lives, a subtle shift occurs, one that invites us to reconsider everything we've been taught about love, sacrifice, and the pursuit of happiness. We have spent so much of our time giving, nurturing, and putting the needs of others before our own, often believing that this is the path to fulfillment. Yet, as time passes, we begin to see that the love and care we've invested are not always returned in the ways we expected. Our families are busy with their own lives, our friends move on, and the things we once held dear seem to fade into the background. This is where the wisdom of Buddhism can offer a new perspective. It teaches us that attachment to expectations, the belief that love and kindness should always be reciprocated in the same way, is the root of suffering. Instead of focusing on what we have not received, Buddhism invites us to look inward, to reclaim our own energy and find peace in solitude. The true essence of self-care is not about withdrawing from others or rejecting our relationships. It is about realizing that true happiness and inner peace come from within, not from external validation. We must stop chasing after the approval or affection of others and start nurturing our own spirit. By letting go of these attachments, we free ourselves to live a life of peace and joy, not bound by the expectations of the past, but empowered by the love we've given to ourselves. This is not selfishness, but a path to wisdom and fulfillment, a realization that the greatest gift we can offer the world is our own peace and love. 5 reasons. Older adults should accept aging and cultivate inner freedom. Reason 1. Freedom from expectations. As we journey through life, we often carry with us the belief that the love and care we give to others will eventually be returned in kind. It's a natural thought, a part of our human experience, to invest in those we care about, expecting that our time, effort, and affection will come back to us. Yet, as time passes, we begin to realize a sobering truth. Love, like life, is impermanent. The relationships we build are not always reciprocal in the ways we hope for, and this can leave us feeling disappointed, anxious, and even resentful. What if the key to true peace, however, lies not in waiting for others to return our love, but in releasing the expectation itself? What if we can free ourselves from the weight of these expectations and instead embrace the freedom of unconditional giving, where love exists not to be returned, but simply to be shared? There was once an elderly woman named Grace who had spent her entire life caring for others. From the moment she was old enough to help, she became the backbone of her family, tending to her siblings, nurturing her children, and always offering a helping hand to her friends and neighbors. She had always believed that the love and sacrifices she made would one day be reciprocated. She had raised her children with this very idea in her heart, thinking that one day they would return the same level of care and attention she had given them. But as the years passed, things began to change. Grace's children, now adults with families of their own, became caught up in their own lives. They no longer called her as often as they used to, and the visits she had once cherished became infrequent. At first, Grace was heartbroken. She sat by the window of her small house, watching the world pass her by, questioning what she had done wrong. Why had her children not returned the love she had so freely given them? Why were the bonds she had worked so hard to create slipping away? Her heart ached with the weight of these unfulfilled expectations. But one day, while sitting alone in her favorite armchair, something within her shifted. She remembered something her grandmother had once said: "Expectations are the chains we bind ourselves with, my dear. If you expect something in return, you will only find suffering." Grace had heard these words before, but this time they resonated deeply. She realized that by holding on to the hope of receiving something back, a phone call, a visit, an acknowledgement, she was only setting herself up for disappointment. She had been clinging to a belief that love should come back to her in the same way she had given it. But life, as she now understood, didn't work that way. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting go of the expectation that others should meet her needs in the same way she had met theirs. In that moment, Grace found a surprising sense of freedom. She no longer needed her children's validation to feel loved. She realized that love itself was the gift, and it was enough just to give it. With a newfound sense of peace, she stopped waiting for something to return and began to find joy in the act of giving itself. Grace began to take long walks in the garden, appreciating the beauty of the flowers that bloomed without any expectation of being admired. She found solace in reading, in knitting scarves for the local shelter, in giving without the thought of receiving. Her joy came not from others' recognition, but from knowing that her heart had room for kindness without conditions. As time passed, something incredible happened. The relationships around her began to shift in ways she had never anticipated. Her children, seeing the peace and happiness radiating from their mother, started to reach out more. They invited her to family gatherings, and while they may not have been able to give back in the same way she had given them, the love between them had transformed. It was no longer an exchange of obligations, but a mutual respect for the freedom of love without conditions. One day, as Grace sat with her daughter, they laughed together about how much they had changed over the years. "Mom," her daughter said, "I think I've finally understood what you meant all those years ago. It's not about what we get back from each other, but about being there, giving and loving, without expecting anything in return. I see now how much peace you've found in that." Grace smiled softly, her heart full. She had found freedom, freedom from expectations, from the need for reciprocation, from the belief that love had to be a transactional exchange. And in that freedom, she had found true happiness. The story of Grace teaches us a powerful lesson. When we release our expectations of others, we free ourselves from the anxiety and disappointment that often accompany unreciprocated love. In embracing love without expectation, we are liberated. We no longer live in anticipation of what we may or may not receive, but instead, we find peace and fulfillment in the act of giving itself. Love, kindness, and care are not debts to be repaid, but gifts to be shared. The freedom that comes from this perspective is profound. It allows us to live without the weight of unmet expectations, and it opens our hearts to the simple joy of giving. So, the next time you find yourself yearning for something in return, remember Grace's journey. Let go of the chains of expectation and allow love to flow freely without the need for reciprocation. In doing so, you will not only find peace, but will discover that the act of loving without expectation is, in itself, the greatest gift you can give. Reason 2. The value of solitude. Solitude is often misunderstood in today's fast-paced, constantly connected world. We associate being alone with loneliness, as if being by ourselves signals a lack of connection, a void that must be filled. Yet, there is a deeper truth hidden within solitude. It is not a state of emptiness, but one of profound opportunity. Solitude, when embraced, can be the key to personal growth, self-reflection, and reconnection with our most authentic selves. In the silence, we are invited to step away from the noise of others' expectations, the distractions of everyday life, and the endless hustle for validation. It is in solitude that we can begin to hear our own thoughts, rediscover our passions, and reconnect with the essence of who we truly are. Rather than fearing solitude or trying to avoid it, we must learn to see it as a gift, an invitation to explore the depth of our being and the vast potential that lies within us. There once lived an old man named Liang who had spent most of his life serving others. He was a teacher, a counselor, a mentor, always busy with people, always surrounded by voices. His home was never empty, his days filled with conversations, with students asking for guidance, with friends seeking advice, with family members relying on him. It was a life well lived, and yet, as the years passed, Liang began to feel something inside him that he couldn't quite explain. Despite all the connections and relationships he had nurtured, he began to feel a deep, quiet loneliness. This loneliness wasn't the kind that came from being alone in a room. It wasn't the emptiness that comes from isolation. It was a deeper, more subtle feeling, the sense that he had been so absorbed in the lives of others that he had forgotten to tend to his own spirit. He had spent decades pouring his energy into the lives of others, but somewhere along the way, he had lost touch with his own passions, his own desires, and his own sense of purpose. One rainy afternoon, as he sat by the window watching the droplets dance across the glass, he realized that the quiet he had once feared was now calling to him. His house, once bustling with the sounds of laughter and conversation, was now still. His children were grown, his students had moved on to their own paths, and his friends, too, were caught up in their own lives. He was alone. But for the first time, Liang didn't feel sorrow. He felt a strange peace. The silence no longer felt like a void. but rather like a space to be filled with something new, something he had been neglecting for years: himself. Liang decided to embrace this newfound solitude. He began to spend his afternoons in the garden, not in the company of others, but alone with the earth, the plants, and the quiet. He would sit for hours, allowing his thoughts to wander, reflecting on his life, his choices, and his desires. In this solitude, he began to rediscover things about himself he had long forgotten. His love for painting, a passion he had abandoned when life became too busy. He started sketching again, each stroke of the brush a small act of reclamation. It wasn't about creating masterpieces for the world to see, but about reconnecting with the joy of creating for himself. As the weeks passed, Liang noticed changes within himself. He felt more centered, more at peace, and for the first time in years, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The solitude that had once felt like a burden now became a sanctuary. It allowed him to reflect on his life, to make sense of his past, and to understand what truly mattered. He didn't need to be surrounded by people to feel valuable. He didn't need constant external validation. The value of solitude was not in the absence of others, but in the presence of his true self. Liang's days no longer revolved around the needs of others. He still helped when asked, but he no longer sought to fill every moment with the demands of others. He had learned to say no when necessary, to honor his own needs, and to cherish the quiet moments of his life. His relationships became more genuine because he was no longer seeking validation or approval from them. He had learned to give to others from a place of abundance, rather than from a place of emptiness. One day, a young student came to visit him, seeking advice on how to find happiness in life. Liang smiled and said, "Happiness doesn't come from the noise around us, nor from the approval of others. It comes from within. You must first learn to be content with yourself, to enjoy your own company, to embrace the silence. Only then will you truly find peace." The student looked at Liang, puzzled, and asked, "But how do I learn to be alone without feeling lonely?" Liang chuckled softly, his eyes twinkling with wisdom. "Ah, you must learn that solitude is not the same as loneliness. Loneliness is when we crave the presence of others to fill a void within us. Solitude, on the other hand, is when we embrace the quiet and allow ourselves to connect with our own inner world. When you can find peace in your own company, you will find that you no longer need to seek it outside." The story of Liang teaches us a profound lesson. Solitude is not a curse, but a gift. It offers us the opportunity to reconnect with ourselves, to rediscover our passions, and to cultivate a sense of inner peace that does not depend on external validation. When we learn to embrace solitude, we free ourselves from the need to constantly seek the approval of others, and we give ourselves the space to grow and reflect. It is in these quiet moments, away from the distractions of the world, that we find our truest selves. So the next time you find yourself alone, do not fear it. Embrace it. Allow the stillness to guide you inward, to explore the depths of your own heart, and to rediscover the joy of being with yourself. Remember, solitude is not loneliness. It is the fertile ground where self-reflection and growth can take root. And in that space, you will find the peace and fulfillment you have been searching for all along. Reason 3. Self-care is not selfishness. In a world that constantly demands more of us, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that taking time for ourselves is a luxury or selfishness. We are taught to prioritize others, our families, our work, our communities, often at the expense of our own well-being. Yet, as we grow older, we begin to realize that we cannot give from an empty cup. Self-care is not selfishness. It is a necessity, especially for those who have spent a lifetime nurturing and caring for others. It is a practice of replenishing the energy and strength we have freely given away over the years. When we take the time to care for ourselves, we not only honor our own needs, but also ensure that we have the capacity to continue giving, loving, and serving others from a place of abundance rather than depletion. True self-care is a gift not just to ourselves, but to those around us. In a small village nestled between rolling hills and vast fields of green, there lived a woman named Mei Lin. She was known for her kindness, her selflessness, and her unwavering dedication to her family and community. For over 60 years, Mei Lin had devoted her life to serving others, raising her children, caring for her aging parents, and always being there for her neighbors in times of need. She never turned away anyone who asked for help, whether it was a warm meal, a listening ear, or a place to stay. Mei Lin was proud of her life's work. She had seen her children grow into successful, independent adults, and her home was always filled with the sound of laughter and love. She had built a reputation as the heart of the village, the person everyone could rely on, the one who always had a smile, no matter how tired she felt. However, as the years went on, Mei Lin began to notice a shift within herself. She no longer had the energy to care for others in the way she once had. Her body, now in its later years, was tired, and her mind, though still sharp, longed for peace. Her children, who had once needed her, were now living their own busy lives. Her friends and neighbors, though grateful for all she had done, were no longer as in need of her constant presence. The village, too, had changed. People were busier, their lives filled with their own struggles and ambitions. One afternoon, as Mei Lin sat by the window, watching the children of the village play in the sun, she realized something profound. She had been so focused on caring for others that she had forgotten to care for herself. She had spent decades giving, pouring out her energy, love, and time. And now, there was little left for her own soul. Her once vibrant spirit felt drained, and though she loved her family and friends dearly, she could not ignore the emptiness she felt inside. For the first time, Mei Lin asked herself a simple yet crucial question. What do I need to feel whole again? At first, she felt guilty for even considering such a question. She had always been the giver, the caretaker, the one who put others' needs above her own. But as she sat in the stillness of the afternoon, she realized that self-care was not about selfishness. It was about replenishing her own spirit so that she could continue to give with joy and love. It was about honoring her own needs, not as a way to withdraw from others, but as a way to reconnect with her own vitality and well-being. Mei Lin began to take small steps toward self-care. She started by taking daily walks in the fields, breathing in the fresh air, and listening to the sounds of nature. She rediscovered her love for painting, something she had once enjoyed but had put aside when life became too busy. She allowed herself to rest without guilt and spent time reflecting on her life, her choices, and what she still desired to experience. One evening, as she sat in her garden, painting the sunset, Mei Lin's daughter came to visit. "Mom," she said, "you've been so quiet lately. I've noticed you've been taking more time for yourself. Is everything all right?" Maylin smiled, setting her paintbrush down. Everything is fine, my dear. I've just realized something important. All these years, I've been giving so much to everyone else, but I've neglected to give something to myself, my own peace, my own joy. Taking time for myself isn't selfish. It's essential. I need to care for my own spirit in order to continue caring for others. Her daughter, though initially surprised, nodded slowly. I see now, Mom. You've always been there for us. Maybe it's time we are here for you too. From that day forward, Maylin's life changed. She continued to care for others, but now she did so with a renewed sense of purpose and energy. Her relationships deepened, not because she was giving more, but because she was giving from a place of fullness. She found joy in the simple things, in taking care of herself, and in knowing that true self-care was not about withdrawing from the world, but about nourishing herself so that she could continue to love and give to those around her. Maylin's journey teaches us a profound truth. Self-care is not selfishness. It is an essential part of maintaining our well-being, especially as we age. When we give so freely to others, we often forget that we too need love, attention, and care. Taking time for ourselves is not a luxury, but a necessity. By replenishing our own energy, we can continue to offer love and support to others from a place of strength rather than depletion. So, the next time you feel the pull of guilt or hesitation when considering your own needs, remember Maylin's story. Honor your own well-being. Embrace the practice of self-care, not as an act of selfishness, but as a necessary act of love for yourself, so that you can continue to love and serve others with a full heart. True self-care is the foundation of a life well lived, where we can give not out of obligation, but out of abundance and joy. Reason 4. Embrace change with grace. As we grow older, we often find ourselves facing changes that seem beyond our control, shifts in our relationships, changes in our health, and a transformation of the world around us. These changes can be challenging, and they sometimes create a sense of loss or uncertainty. Yet, there is profound wisdom in embracing these transitions rather than resisting them. The Buddha taught us that change is the only constant in life. Anicca, or impermanence, is one of the core principles in Buddhism, reminding us that everything is in constant flux, and that to resist change is to invite suffering. Rather than fighting against the inevitable, we can choose to accept it with grace. Embracing change does not mean we give up or resign ourselves to passivity. Instead, it means understanding that change is part of life's natural flow, and by flowing with it, we can find peace, adaptability, and a deeper sense of connection with ourselves and the world around us. In the heart of a bustling town lived an elderly woman named Sumi. She had spent her youth surrounded by family, friends, and the vibrant life of the community. In her prime, she was known for her vitality, her wisdom, and her kindness. She was the one everyone turned to for advice, for support, and for comfort. Sumi had raised children, helped raise grandchildren, and spent years volunteering at the local temple. Life had been full and beautiful. But as the years wore on, things began to change. Her children, once so dependent on her, now had families of their own and busy lives that took them far away. The friends who had once been constant companions were now few, some having passed, others simply growing distant as their own paths diverged. Sumi's health, once robust, began to decline. Her knees hurt after a long walk. Her hands no longer moved with the same ease they once did, and her eyesight wasn't what it had been. Her mind was still sharp, but the body that had carried her for so many years was starting to show signs of wear. One evening, after a long day of trying to keep up with the chores that once felt so simple, Sumi sat by the window, gazing out at the setting sun. A gentle breeze ruffled the leaves of the trees in the garden, and for a moment, Sumi felt a pang of longing. She missed the way things used to be, when she was surrounded by her children, when the house was always full of laughter, when her body didn't ache and her mind didn't tire so easily. Her thoughts turned inward, and she found herself resisting these changes. She had always prided herself on being strong, on being the pillar for others. But now, she felt as though the foundation of her life was shifting beneath her. Why did she have to face these changes alone? Why did she have to give up what she had once held dear? It was then that she remembered something a monk had once said to her when she was much younger. The river flows, and it never asks the stone to stay in place. It carries all things, even stones, to where they must go. She had always understood the words in a theoretical sense, but now, in the quiet of her own heart, they held a new meaning. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, allowing the wisdom of the words to sink in. Life, like the river, was always in motion. She could not hold on to the past, nor could she fight the changes that were happening in her body and in her relationships. The more she resisted, the more she suffered. But if she could allow herself to flow with the changes, to embrace them as part of her journey, perhaps she could find peace in the midst of them. The next morning, Sumi woke with a sense of quiet resolve. She knew that she couldn't go back in time, and that her body was no longer what it had been. But instead of lamenting the changes, she decided to embrace them. She began taking slower, gentler walks, enjoying the beauty of the flowers in her garden, the chirping of the birds, and the softness of the breeze. She no longer hurried through life, but instead allowed herself to savor the moments, accepting that this was now a part of her story. She also reached out to her children, not to ask for help, but simply to connect. She shared her thoughts with them openly, expressing her love, her gratitude, and her acceptance of the changes. It wasn't about holding on to the past or expecting things to be the way they once were. It was about embracing what was and moving forward with grace. In time, Sumi found that the changes she had feared were not as frightening as she had imagined. As she embraced them with acceptance and understanding, they became a natural part of her life's flow. Her children, though busy, began to visit more often, and she found new ways to engage with her community, offering her wisdom and support in ways that didn't rely on her physical strength. Sumi's life, though different from what it had once been, was still rich with meaning. She had learned to embrace change not as a loss, but as an opportunity for growth, for connection, and for peace. And in that acceptance, she found herself more fully alive than ever before. Sumi's journey illustrates the power of embracing change with grace. Change is an inevitable part of life, and resisting it only leads to suffering. Instead of fighting the natural flow of life, we can choose to flow with it, accepting each phase with an open heart. The Buddha taught us that impermanence is not something to fear, but something to embrace. When we accept that everything is constantly changing, we free ourselves from the burden of attachment and find peace in the present moment. So the next time you face a change in your life, whether it's a change in your health, your relationships, or your circumstances, remember Sumi's story. Embrace the change with grace, knowing that it is part of the natural rhythm of life. By accepting what is, rather than clinging to what was, we create space for new possibilities, deeper peace, and greater connection with ourselves and the world around us. Change is not an enemy to be fought, but a friend to be welcomed. For it is in change that we grow, evolve, and find true freedom. Reason 5. Finding joy in the present moment. In the whirlwind of life, it's easy to get caught up in the past or obsess over the future, always chasing after something, whether it's success, validation, or the resolution of past regrets. Yet, in this constant pursuit, we often overlook the most profound truth that the Buddha teaches. The present moment is all we truly have. True happiness is not found in the accumulation of past achievements or in the anticipation of what might come. Instead, it lies in the simplicity of the present, in the joy of simply being, without needing anything more. The Buddha taught us that the present moment is where we can find true peace, for it is here that we are most connected to ourselves and the world around us. This is not just a philosophical ideal, but a practical way of living, one that invites us to slow down, to appreciate what we have, and to discover joy in the small, everyday moments. It is in these moments, walking in nature, reading a book, or simply sitting in stillness, that we can find contentment, because in the present, we have everything we need. Once, in a quiet village nestled between green hills, there lived a man named Hari. Hari was a successful businessman who had spent most of his life striving for more. He built a thriving business empire, acquired a beautiful home, and garnered the respect of his peers. Yet, despite all of his accomplishments, Hari never felt truly happy. The more he gained, the more he desired, and he constantly found himself looking ahead, wondering what more he could achieve to fill the emptiness he felt inside. His life was marked by an endless race, always chasing something: the next promotion, the next business deal, the next step toward a seemingly perfect life. But as the years went by, Hari began to feel a deep sense of dissatisfaction. He had everything he thought he needed, yet something was missing. He often found himself feeling exhausted, stressed, and disconnected from the world around him. Even when he was surrounded by his family, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was lacking. One day, Hari's life took an unexpected turn. He was forced to take a break from his business due to health issues. For the first time in years, he had no deadlines, no meetings, no work to occupy his mind. He found himself with nothing to do but to sit in his large, quiet home. At first, the stillness felt overwhelming. His mind raced with worries about his business, his future, and the many things he had left undone. But after a few days of restless silence, something began to shift within him. He started to notice things he had never paid attention to before. The sound of birds singing outside his window, the warmth of the sun on his skin, the rustle of leaves in the wind. He began to take walks in the nearby forest, something he had never done before because he was always too busy. As he walked through the woods, the cool breeze brushing against his face, he felt a strange sense of peace. The world around him was so simple, so vibrant, and yet he had never taken the time to truly appreciate it. One morning, as he sat by the riverbank, watching the water flow gently over the rocks, Hari remembered a teaching he had once heard. The present moment is all that truly exists. The words had never meant much to him before, but now, sitting there in the stillness, they resonated deeply. He realized that his constant pursuit of the future, of more success, had caused him to miss out on the beauty of the present. The past was gone, and the future was uncertain. The only thing that was real, that was truly his, was the moment he was living in. Hari began to let go of his need for constant achievement and control. He stopped thinking about what was missing and started appreciating what he already had. He found joy in simple pleasures, reading books, sitting in the sun, and spending quiet time with his family. He learned to listen to his own thoughts without distraction, to savor meals without rushing, and to embrace the present moment with gratitude. His health improved as well. Hari realized that by letting go of the relentless pursuit of more, he had freed himself from the stress that had been weighing on his mind and body. He had found joy in the simplicity of life, in being present with himself and the world around him. One day, his daughter asked him, "Dad, you've been so different lately. What's changed?" Hari smiled and replied, "I've learned to be here, in this moment, fully. I've realized that happiness isn't something I need to chase. It's already here, in the simplicity of life, in the present." His daughter looked at him, curious. "But how do you do that? How do you stop worrying about the future?" Hari thought for a moment and said, "The Buddha taught us that the past is gone, and the future is not yet here. We only have now. And when we embrace now, when we truly live in the moment, we find that happiness is already within us. The trick is to stop looking for it and simply allow it to be." From that day forward, Hari found peace in the present. His business, though still important, no longer consumed him. He enjoyed his work, but he no longer defined his worth by it. His relationships deepened, his health improved, and most importantly, he felt a sense of contentment that had eluded him for so many years. Hari's story teaches us a powerful lesson. True happiness is not found in the past or the future, but in the present moment. The Buddha's teachings remind us that the only time that is real is now. And when we embrace the present with full awareness, we open ourselves to true peace and contentment. So often, we get caught up in what has already passed or what might come, but in doing so, we miss the beauty of the life unfolding before us. Take a moment today to slow down, to be present with yourself, and to appreciate the simple joys of life. Whether it's a quiet walk in nature, a good book, or simply sitting in stillness, these moments are the building blocks of true happiness. Life is fleeting, and the only thing we truly have is this moment. Embrace it fully, for it is in the present that we find the peace and joy we have been seeking all along. As we grow older, we often find that the relationships and responsibilities that once defined us begin to shift. In the process, many of us realize that we've spent so much of our lives giving to others, pouring our energy into their well-being, that we have neglected to nurture our own hearts and souls. This is a journey that many elders must walk, the realization that it is time to turn inward and reconnect with our own passions and peace. Consider the story of May, a woman who had spent decades as the pillar of her family, the one who cared for everyone else. She raised her children, supported her husband, and gave generously to her community. Yet, as the years passed, She found herself standing at a crossroads. Her children had grown, and the community she once served had moved on. Alone in her quiet home, May began to ask herself, "What is left for me?" At first, she struggled with feelings of emptiness, as though her entire life had been about serving others, leaving nothing behind for herself. But then, something shifted. She remembered the Buddha's teachings. To let go is to be free. This thought gave her a new perspective. May realized that in order to truly give to others, she needed to first reclaim her own peace and energy. Instead of feeling regret over the time she had spent giving away her vitality, May decided to embrace the present moment. She began to take long walks in nature, rediscovered her love for painting, and made time for stillness, just being with herself. In this peaceful space, she was able to reconnect with the parts of herself that had been lost for so long. This journey was not just about leisure. It was about reclaiming herself. As May embraced these small, simple joys, she found that her heart was full again. No longer did she look outside herself for validation. She had learned that true contentment lies not in what we do for others or what we gain from them, but in the quiet space we create within ourselves. When we let go of the need for external validation, when we turn inward and find peace within, we experience a freedom unlike any other. May's life, though changed, was now filled with joy and purpose once again. The lesson here is simple, yet profound. Reclaiming your peace, your energy, and your sense of self is one of the highest forms of self-respect. In doing so, we free ourselves from the chains of expectation and open ourselves up to a newfound joy and freedom. The Buddha's teachings remind us that attachment to outcomes, to others' approval, or to the past only binds us to suffering. By letting go of the need to be validated by the outside world, we make room for the inner peace that leads to true contentment. So, let us all take a moment to reflect. In the quiet, in the stillness, we find not only ourselves, but a path to lasting happiness. Reclaiming our energy and focusing on our own peace is not a selfish act, but an act of profound wisdom. In this space, we are free. In this space, we are whole. The journey inward is the one that leads to true freedom and joy. Let us embrace it fully, with open hearts, and the peaceful knowing that all we need is already within us.